The morning sky over Kumasi was heavy and gray, the kind that makes everything feel slower and sadder. Rain drizzled softly as mourners gathered around the open grave. Mabel stood close to her husband's coffin, her black scarf clinging to her damp face. She was a woman in her late 50s, still graceful, but today her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Everyone had come to say goodbye to Kofi, her husband of 30 years. Everyone except their only son, Kwame. All through the ceremony, Mabel kept glancing at the gate, her heart jumping every time she thought she saw movement. She told herself he might still come. Maybe traffic held him up. Maybe he'd surprise her at the last moment. But the only thing that came was a buzz on her phone. She opened the message with trembling fingers. "Sorry, Ma. Amma's birthday plans were already paid for. We'll visit next week." Her breath caught. She stared at the screen as rain blurred her vision. Around her, whispers spread through the crowd. "He didn't come," someone murmured. Her husband's brother shook his head and muttered, "What kind of son does that?" The pastor's voice called her back. It was time. The coffin was lowered slowly into the red earth. Mabel watched silently, her umbrella slipping from her hand. The tears she'd been holding finally stopped. Her voice came out low and steady, almost like a prayer. He buried his father while dancing at a party. That night, Kumasi was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. Mabel sat alone in her living room, the only light coming from her phone screen. She wasn't looking for anything, just scrolling aimlessly to distract her thoughts. Then she saw it, a post that made her heart stop. There was her son, Kwame, smiling under strings of fairy lights at a fancy restaurant in Accra. His arm was around his wife, Amma, who was glowing in a gold dress. Plates of food, bottles of champagne, and a big cake covered in candles filled the background. The caption read, "Celebrating my queen. Hashtag Amma turns 30, hashtag couple goals, hashtag good vibes only." Mabel's fingers froze. She blinked, hoping she was seeing wrong. But no, the photos kept coming. Kwame laughing, Amma dancing, their friends cheering. Each picture felt like a slap. Her husband's coffin had been lowered into the ground only hours ago, and here was their son, laughing under party lights. The same son Kofi had worked himself to the bone for. The same boy he had sold land to educate, the one he believed would carry their name with pride. Mabel's throat tightened as she scrolled through the comments. People were congratulating them, calling them the perfect couple. Perfect. She almost laughed. She set the phone down and stared at the wall for a long time. The house felt too big, too empty. The chair where Kofi used to sit was still there, his old reading glasses resting on the side table. She picked up his photo frame, the one taken years ago when they were younger, smiling after church. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't fall. Her voice came out soft and cracked. "He didn't deserve your name, Kofi." She sat there for a while, the rain still tapping gently outside, the glow of the phone fading beside her. Something inside her shifted, not anger, not even heartbreak anymore, just a quiet, heavy resolve. If her son could dance while his father was buried, then maybe love alone wasn't enough. Maybe lessons had to be learned the hard way. She wiped her face, straightened the photo frame, and turned off her phone. The house went dark again, but her mind was no longer lost. For the first time that day, Mabel felt steady. Some things, she realized, can't be taught by words, only by consequence. A few days after the funeral, the house felt too still. The guests were gone, the condolences had stopped, and only silence filled the room. Mabel spent most of her time sitting by the window, listening to the birds and thinking about Kofi. That's how Mr. Boateng, the family lawyer, found her one morning when he came by with a brown envelope. He was a kind man, always speaking gently. "Madam Mabel," he said, taking off his hat, "I came to go over Kofi's will." They sat in the living room where the air still smelled faintly of incense from the funeral. Mr. Boateng opened his papers and explained everything carefully. "Your husband left all his assets to you and Kwame jointly. The 2 houses, the savings account, and the land at Ajisu." Mabel nodded slowly. She already knew this, but hearing it aloud felt heavier somehow. Kofi had trusted that his wife and son would take care of what he'd built, together. Just as Mr. Boateng was leaving, a car horn sounded outside. Mabel looked through the curtain and saw Kwame's silver SUV pulling up the driveway. For a moment, her heart wanted to soften, but then she remembered the text message, the laughter in those photos. Kwame walked in wearing sunglasses and a casual smile, as if he hadn't missed his own father's burial. "Ma," he said lightly, hugging her quickly, "I'm sorry about the funeral. You know Amma doesn't like sad events." She said it would have been too heavy for her spirit. Mabel stared at him quietly, her hands folded on her lap. "Of course," she said softly. "I understand." He talked for a while, about his business, his new clients, the drive from Accra, but Mabel barely heard a word. She watched him and wondered when he had become such a stranger. The little boy who used to run to her with scraped knees was gone, replaced by a man who measured love in convenience. After he left that evening, the house felt colder. Mabel stood by the door long after his car disappeared down the road. Then she turned, walked to her husband's old desk, and sat down. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the wooden surface. She took out a clean sheet of paper and began to write a letter to Mr. Boateng. Her handwriting was slow but steady. Dear Mr. Boateng, I would like to make some changes to my will. Effective immediately. She paused, reading the words carefully. Her hand didn't shake once. When she folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, she felt something lift off her chest. For the first time since the funeral, Mabel wasn't just grieving, she was deciding. And deep down, she knew Kofi would have understood. A week later, Mabel woke up with a strange kind of calm. She hadn't slept well in days, but that morning, something inside her told her exactly what she needed to do. She dressed in a simple blue dress, packed a small lunch, and took a taxi across town to visit her late husband's old friend, Pastor Tun. The pastor ran a small orphanage at the edge of Kumasi. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of life. As soon as Mabel stepped through the gate, she was surrounded by laughter. Children were playing football on the dusty field, some chasing a makeshift ball made from tied-up rags. Others were singing as they washed their clothes in buckets. Pastor Tund came out to greet her with a warm smile. Mabel, it's been too long, he said, hugging her. His eyes softened when he added, I'm sorry about Kofi. He was a good man. They sat under a mango tree, talking about old times, the early days when Kofi used to visit the orphanage to fix the generator or bring food supplies. Mabel listened quietly, her heart filling with both pride and ache. Later, she joined the children for lunch. They sat on wooden benches, passing bowls of rice and beans around the table. One little girl, maybe 6 or 7, noticed that her friend had less food and quickly scooped some of hers onto the other plate without being asked. Mabel watched the small act, her eyes stinging. These children had almost nothing, yet they shared everything. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, a real one. As the sun began to set, she walked with Pastor Tun through the quiet courtyard. These children, she said softly, they have so little, but their hearts are full. She paused, looking down at her hands. I wish my son had half their hearts. The pastor didn't speak, but the sadness in his eyes said he understood. When evening came, Mabel sat in Pastor Tun's small office, papers spread out before. She told him she wanted to make a donation, not just for now, but for the future. Together, they contacted Mr. Boateng, and within an hour, the new will was ready. Most of her estate, the houses, the savings, the land, would go to the orphanage. Kwame would receive only a small inheritance, enough to show she hadn't forgotten him, but not enough to feed his pride. When everything was signed, Mabel placed her pen down slowly. She felt no guilt, only peace. As she sealed the envelope and wrote her lawyer's name on it, she whispered softly to the empty room, "This one's for your father, Kofi." Then she smiled again, the same quiet, knowing smile Kofi used to love, and locked the will away. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Mabel heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside. She looked through the window and saw a shiny black SUV pull into the compound. Her heart didn't skip the way it used to when her son visited. This time, she just sighed and waited. Kwame stepped out first, wearing dark glasses and a gold watch that caught the sunlight. Amma followed, holding a bouquet of bright flowers and a box of wine. Oh, finally, Amma said, fanning herself. That drive from Accra was too long. The traffic was crazy. Mabel opened the door before they could knock. You're welcome, she said softly. Kwame leaned in for a quick hug, more like a polite gesture than real warmth. Ma, you look good, he said, smiling as if he hadn't missed the funeral at all. Thank you, Mabel replied. Come inside. The house was spotless, filled with the faint smell of stew she had cooked earlier. They sat in the living room, making small talk that felt forced. Amma looked around, admiring the new curtains. So cozy here, Mama Mabel. You must have missed us, she said with a bright laugh. Mabel smiled politely. I did, she said. But time passes, doesn't it? Dinner was quiet at first. The sound of cutlery filled the gaps where conversation should have been. Then Amma, between mouthfuls, decided to break the silence. We felt so bad missing the funeral, Mama Mabel, she said, twirling her fork. But you know how important birthdays are. Everything was already paid for. Mabel froze for a moment, then lifted her eyes slowly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, my dear, she said, her voice calm but sharp. And funerals are for those who remember who raised them. Amma's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The air turned heavy. Kwame shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. Let's not dwell on that, he said quickly. You know Amma didn't mean anything by it. He leaned back, changing the subject to himself. Anyway, Ma, I just signed a big deal. My company is expanding. We're doing really well now. Mabel nodded silently. That's good, Kwame. I'm happy for you. He talked for a long time about profits, clients, new cars. But Mabel wasn't really listening. She studied him carefully, this man who once ran barefoot through the compound calling her name. now sitting across from her like a stranger. When they finally stood to leave, Amma hugged her again, smiling wide. "Next time, we'll stay longer." Mabel only nodded, watching as they drove away, laughter echoing faintly through the car window. The moment the gate closed, the house fell quiet again. Mabel sat back down, her face unreadable. There was no anger left, only the calm certainty that she had done the right thing. That evening, the house was quiet again. The dishes were washed, the chairs pushed neatly back under the table, and the smell of perfume from Amma's visit still lingered faintly in the... Mabel sat alone in her room, a small reading lamp casting a warm circle of light on her desk. In front of her lay the folded copy of her new will. She had already read it twice that day, but she read it again, slowly this time, every word settling deeper into her heart. There was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she said gently. Her niece, Ajoa, stepped inside with a small smile. She had come by to check on her aunt after hearing that Kwame and Amma had visited. "Auntie," she said, "I saw their car leaving. How did it go?" Mabel looked up from the papers and smiled faintly. "It went," she said simply. "They came. They talked. They left." Ajoa sat beside her, noticing the document on the table. Her eyes widened slightly. "Is that your will again?" Mabel nodded, her fingers brushing lightly over the envelope. "Yes. I was just making sure everything is exactly how I want it." There was a quiet pause before Ajoa asked softly, "Auntie, are you sure about this?" "It's a big decision." Mabel leaned back in her chair, her expression calm but firm. "My son learned how to take, Ajoa. Now he'll learn what it means to lose." Her voice wasn't bitter, just tired, the way a person sounds after carrying pain for too long. Ajoa looked down at her hands. She had seen it all. How Kwame called only when he needed money, how Mabel's face always fell after every short visit or rushed phone call. Still, hearing her aunt speak like this broke her heart a little. "You've always been a good mother," Ajoa said softly. "Maybe one day he'll realize that." Mabel gave a small smile. "Maybe. But if he does, it'll be because life finally taught him what I couldn't." She picked up the will, folded it neatly, and walked over to the metal box sitting in the corner. She opened it, placed the envelope inside, and locked it with a small silver key. The sound of the lock clicking shut filled the quiet room. Ajoa watched her carefully. "So, what will happen when you're gone?" Mabel turned to her, her eyes steady and clear. "When I'm gone," she said, placing the key gently on the table, "let the truth open the door." The two women sat in silence after that, the rain beginning to fall softly outside. Ajoa reached out and held her aunt's hand. There were no more words left to say, only the weight of love, loss, and the quiet justice of a mother who had finally found her peace. Years passed quietly, like pages turning in a book. The pain of losing Kofi had softened into memory, and Mabel learned to fill her days with purpose instead of sadness. She was older now, her hair silver and her steps slower, but her spirit stayed strong. Every Sunday, she visited Hope Haven Orphanage, the place that had given her peace when her heart was broken. The children there loved her. They called her Grandma Mabel and ran to hug her every time she arrived. She brought them clothes, toys, and hot meals. Sometimes, she simply sat among them, listening to their laughter. Watching them share food, stories, and dreams made her feel alive again. When Pastor Tun told her the dormitories were too crowded, she didn't think twice. "We'll build another one," she said firmly. And she did. The new building stood bright and strong, painted in warm colors, with a sign above the entrance that read, Kofi Mensa Dormitory. Each time she saw that name, her heart swelled with pride. "You're still giving, Kofi," she would whisper softly. Kwame, on the other hand, grew more distant. He called only when he needed something, money for a business deal, help with a loan, or a favor she could no longer give. His messages always started with "Hi Ma" and ended with "I'll pay you back soon." Between those words was silence. Mabel no longer cried over it. She had stopped expecting more. Instead, she poured her love into the children who truly needed it, the ones who smiled with gratitude for every little thing. On her 65th birthday, the orphanage threw her a small surprise celebration. The children sang for her, presenting her with a handmade card filled with drawings of hearts and flowers. Mabel laughed, clapping along, her eyes shining. That evening, back home, she sat at her desk with a cup of tea and her glasses perched low on her nose. She opened her metal box and took out her will. After reading it one last time, she took out a fresh piece of paper and began to write a short note. Her handwriting was shaky now, but her message was clear and steady. A good heart is richer than any inheritance. She placed the note inside an envelope and sealed it together with her will. Then she turned off the lamp, walked to her bed, and sat for a moment, looking at the framed photo of her and Kofi on the nightstand. "Everything's in order now, my love," she whispered. "You can rest easy." She lay down, pulling the blanket over her shoulder. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, the same gentle sound that had followed her through so many years of love, loss, and forgiveness. That night, Mabel fell asleep with a peaceful smile, the kind that only comes when a heart finally knows it's done what's right. The office of Mr. Boateng was quiet but tense. Months had passed since Mabel's peaceful passing, and now the family had gathered to hear the reading of her will. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and ink, a mixture of solemnity and anticipation. Kwame sat at the edge of his seat, dressed sharply in a dark suit. He smoothed his tie nervously, already imagining how he would use the inheritance, maybe buy a bigger car, invest in a new business, or spoil Alma with a long vacation. The corners of his mouth lifted in a small, confident smile. Around him, the rest of the family murmured quietly. Some were curious, some sympathetic. Mr. Boateng, calm and professional as ever, cleared his throat and opened the envelope containing Mabel's final wishes. "Family," he began, his voice steady, "we are here to read Mrs. Mabel Mensa's last will and testament." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the... Kwame leaned forward, eager. Yes, go on," he whispered under his breath, almost to himself. Mr. Boateng continued, reading slowly and clearly. "The majority of the estate is to be donated to Hope Haven Orphanage, to continue the work and legacy of my late husband, Kofi Mensa, and myself. Mr. Kwame Mensa will receive one family photo album and a letter from his mother." The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. Gasps filled the room. Some family members clutched their hands to their mouth. Others exchanged shocked glances. Kwame's smile froze. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Alma, standing beside him, looked furious, her face flushing red. She whispered sharply, "She can't do that. This isn't fair." Mr. Boateng raised a hand to calm her. "I'm afraid, madam," he said gently. "The will has been legally signed and filed. It is effective immediately." She already did. Kwame sank back into his chair, his mind racing. A wave of disbelief washed over him, followed by a sinking, heavy realization. He had thought the estate would be his, ready to divide and use as he pleased. But Mabel had thought differently. She had made a choice that reflected her heart, not his expectations. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her decision pressing down. Kwame looked down at the small photo album in his hands, a single tangible connection to the family he had taken for granted. Mr. Boateng closed the document carefully, giving a respectful nod to the family. "Mrs. Mensa wanted to leave a legacy that truly mattered," he said softly. Kwame's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope containing his mother's letter. He realized, for the first time in years, that Mabel's love had never been about money. It had been about teaching, about showing what truly matters. And now, in her absence, the lesson was his to finally understand. Kwame sat alone in Mr. Boateng's office, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his chest. His hands trembled as he picked up the envelope marked with his mother's handwriting. He had imagined this moment many times, tearing open a thick will full of money and property, but not this. Not the quiet, deliberate way she had left him just one thing, a letter. His fingers fumbled with the flap. The paper slipped out slowly, and he unfolded it carefully, as if handling something fragile. Then he read the words. "You missed your father's final day to celebrate someone who can leave you any time. I hope one day you learn what love truly means. When you do, my door will be open, in heaven or in memory." The room seemed to spin around him. His eyes stung, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down his cheeks. He blinked rapidly, trying to stop them, but they fell anyway, hot and heavy, leaving trails on his face he couldn't hide. He remembered the small things he had taken for granted. His mother's gentle smile when he came home from school, the sound of her laugh echoing through the living room, her soft voice praying for him each night before he fell asleep. She had always been there, giving, loving, patient. And he had chosen distractions over her presence, parties over family, convenience over respect. Kwame clutched the letter tightly, his knuckles white. Each word felt like a needle, a sharp reminder of the life he could never get back. The day his father was buried, the empty chair at his mother's side, the disappointment in her eyes, it all came rushing back. He wanted to call her, to tell her he was sorry, to hear her voice one more time. But the truth hit him hard. It was too late. Mabel had passed, and there was no second chance. He sank into the chair, the letter pressed against his chest. For the first time, he understood that love wasn't something you could buy or schedule. It was in the moments you showed up, in the care you gave, in the respect you carried for those who raised you. All the money, the houses, the land, none of it mattered now. What mattered was the quiet, unshakable love his mother had shown, and the lesson he had ignored for far too long. The office was silent except for his soft, ragged breath. Kwame's pride had crumbled, leaving only regret and the aching realization that some doors, once closed, can never be reopened. He pressed the letter to his lips and whispered, almost inaudibly, "I'm sorry, Ma." And for the first time, he truly meant it. Months had passed since the will reading, and Kwame felt a quiet pull he couldn't ignore. One morning, he drove out to the orphanage, the same place his mother had loved so much. The gate came into view, painted bright and welcoming. A sign read, "Kofi and Mabel Mensa Home." His heart tightened. As he stepped out of the car, children ran past him, laughing and shouting, their bare feet kicking up little clouds of dust. Their joy was pure, unguarded. Pastor Tund came forward, smiling warmly. "Kwame, it's good to see you," he said, clasping his shoulder firm. There was no judgment in his tone, only kindness. Inside the orphanage, the walls were alive with color and energy. On one wall, framed photographs of Mabel and Kofi hung side by side, smiling, happy, their hands clasped in a moment captured forever. Kwame's chest tightened, and he lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of his past mistakes. He knelt down to a group of children and began helping serve plates of rice and beans. The smells and laughter surrounded him, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of peace. One little boy smiled up at him, offering a spoonful of food. Kwame swallowed hard, remembering all he had ignored in his own life. His voice broke as he whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Ma." Pastor Tund placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You can't change the past, son, but you can live her lesson." Kwame nodded slowly. As he moved from child to child, serving food and sharing smiles, his mother's words echoed in his mind. "Love isn't what you say, it's what you show." He realized then that the inheritance he had truly needed wasn't money or it was the lesson she had left him, how to care, how to give, how to love. Kwame's eyes filled with tears, but this time there was no shame, only understanding. Redemption, not revenge. Love, not regret. He smiled through his tears, ready to honor her legacy in every action, every day, for the rest of his life.